Hello and welcome back. In this video we're going to be making the lemon, but instead of starting over from scratch on a new fruit, we've already done a lot of the groundwork with the orange, so I think we're just going to open up our existing orange. So you can open up mine or the one that you've created. We're going to be opening up orange O2. And just to make sure that there is no accidental oversaves, I always like to go in right away, and I'm going to save this guy as video 4. We're going to call this one lemon. Overwrite that guy. So now if we jump here and we look at our reference, you can tell that the shape of the lemon is pretty different from that of the orange. You get a little bit of a bump here on the back side of it, and then you get this little dimple out the front, the tip of the orange. And overall, the skin or the surface is bumpier than what you have on the orange. The orange was very subtle sort of bumpiness, just so it didn't look perfectly round, but this definitely has some undulating qualities to the surface of it. So we're going to try and mimic that. So let's jump back to our orange. And the first thing we want to do is we want to get rid of this sculpting detail that we added there to that. So with our item selected, you're going to jump into the surface subtab of your properties panel, and we're just going to click off the multi-resolution, and it's going to ask you if you really want to do that. And yes, that is indeed what we really want to do. And just so it doesn't get in our way, I'm going to toggle off this texture group here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select these top polygons and shift up to expand that. And I'm going to make the little dimple on the top. And we're going to move this up about 50 millimeters. So that is going to be the top dimple. And then the orange, where it was round, we want to make it sort of more of an oval shape. So we're going to scale this, but we're only going to scale the body on 2 axes. And that's what these little handles here are for. So we can just scale that in, and it only scales just the 2 axes at the same time. So this, in this case, it is the X and the Z. So we're going to come in about 78% on that to give us our lemon shape. Right there, I think, is just fine. So already we're getting a much better silhouette. That looks very much more lemon-like. So now we need to build this dimple here on the front. So I'm just going to rotate down here, select these bottommost polygons, and select the move tool and drag those guys down. And right off, that is much too large, so we're just going to scale it, R key, to get our scale tool. Scale that up some. And then I think I'm going to bring this point down here, so I'm going to hit the 1 key to go into my vertex mode. W to move that. Bring that down a little bit too. That's a very subtle little change. Now to my eye, this is looking a little stretched inside of here now. We're not getting that sort of dimple look that I think I'm aiming for. So I want to create another edge in here that I can use to manipulate that. So I'm going to hit 3 to go into my polygons mode, and I'm going to select this row of polygons right here around that tip that we dragged down. And then we're going to edit that mesh, and we're going to use our loop slice here, the Alt-C key. But before we activate it, we want to make sure the slice selected option is enabled. And what that's going to do is basically going to allow the loop slice to turn around a corner and allow you to select the direction that the loop slice is going to be cutting. So now that we have that selected, I can click in the viewport, and we can position that about halfway is fine. And I'm going to hit Q to drop that tool, and then I'm going to hit 2 to go into my edge editing mode, and that'll be selected since it was newly created there. So then I can go into deform, and I want to smooth that out because it's a little too rectangular for my taste. Smooth that out a bunch. Q to drop that tool. And then I think we're going to scale that. Be mindful of our silhouette. And I think right there, that's giving us a much better sort of dimple sticking out the front of that lemon. You know, maybe we can actually even enlarge that some. So shift up arrow. And I'm going to grab this middle handle to scale it all at the same time. All right, yeah, I think that's giving us a good silhouette there. That's giving us a nice shape on our lemon. And before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's jump in here and select our little stem and move him up another 50 millimeters as well. Well, since we don't have that sculpting detail there anymore, actually we don't need to move him up quite as high. So something right about in there I think is okay. All right, so I think modeling wise, we got it set up here. So let's make sure we change this name here, lemon. On that, hit Control Save to make sure that we're saved. So now let's jump over into our rendering toolbox so we can start adjusting some of these surface properties to see if we can change this into a lemon. So I'm going to hit Control Tab, going to go into my render view, and let's get the camera here and make sure that we got this oriented so we're going to get a better look from the lemon. Let's see what that looks like. I want to rotate this a little bit more. So like I said, we just had on the orange, there was just some sort of subtle undulation to the surface there that was making it look like an orange, but we want to emphasize that even more for the lemon. So I think we're going to go in here. Let's change these names before we jump into these. We're going to call this lemon flesh. Yes, I want to rename that tag. And we'll rename this guy lemon stem. Also rename that tag. All right, let's go into this noise texture that we had here, and let's just scale it down and see what that's going to look like. So if we scale that down to 100 millimeters there, oh, right away there it's starting to look a lot more like a lemon. We can probably scale that back though, how much that is affecting that. So in the texture layer, I'm just going to change the opacity of that to 80%. Now it isn't quite as bumpy, very subtle little difference. Now let's go through and take these materials and just start making them yellow. So depending on how lemony yellow you want your lemon to look, I'm changing the material item first since that's sort of the underlying foundation. And then a lot of this has to do with this starfield texture that we created. And since it's still instance, we only need to change the parent object. So I'm going to come up here, make these fairly saturated. So really that change right there really pushed that into making it look like a lemon. I think we still have a little bit of residual reds here in that foreground color, which makes it look a little bit phony. It's a lot more subtle. You don't have quite the color variation, I think, on a lemon as you do on an orange. We want that to be a little more subtle than what we were doing in the orange. Maybe that highlight, in this particular instance, just seems a little strong to me. So I'm going to go back here to this clear coat and scale that back, maybe to 40%. Of course, like I said earlier, we're going to be doing more tweaking of the surfaces once we get our final lighting and our final setup, but this is just going to get us close. And I think that's really about it for the lemon. It was fairly simple to just grab that orange and adjust some of the properties and turn it into a different fruit. So in summary, we were able to grab our fruit, remove the sculpting details for it, just do some scaling and some manipulation to the surface using the standard transform tools. And then we just modified a few settings in the shader tree, renamed our object, and now we have a lemon. Next up, we're going to jump on making a cherry and see what we can do there.